Let's set our motivation and think that we will listen and share together today so we can explore and learn, and in particular to learn about how our own mind works, how our mind creates happiness and suffering. And in doing so, to learn some ways to counteract the afflictive parts of the mind that create suffering, and to enhance our good qualities that create the causes for happiness. And let's do this with a feeling of love and compassion for all living beings. In other words, not just looking out for our own welfare, our own good, but with a larger, more expansive purpose to really be a benefit to all others. And to benefit them without prejudice, without bias, favoring some people with attachment, ignoring others with aversion. But let's have a determination to overcome this kind of judgmental mind and be able to look at all living beings as beings who simply want to be happy and not suffer, who are exactly like us in that regard. And in that way extend our kindness and compassion to them. So take a moment and make that your motivation for being here today. So in our little series this year called Don't Believe Everything We Think, we've been going through this book, and the book is based on a Tibetan poem written several centuries ago by Gyaltse Tongme Zampo, and it's called the 37 Practices of Bodhisattvas, and it talks about 37 practices that bodhisattvas do. Bodhisattvas are beings who have a very strong intention to become fully awakened for the benefit of all living beings. And so every month we've been talking about one verse. So today we're on the 9th verse. The previous verses, I'll just tell you what they're about so you can have the context. Verse talked about our precious human life and how to use it wisely so that we can really appreciate the opportunity we have with this life and not feel depressed, not feel deprived, but really feel invigorated. And the second verse was talking about the mental poisons of attachment, anger, and ignorance, these being the things that cause so much of our confusion and suffering in life. Third verse was about calming the mind and simplifying our lives, because if we can simplify our lives, then we don't get so caught up in clinging attachment, in anger, in distraction, in busyness, and running around, and modern life. Yeah? So how to simplify our lives, but still remain engaged. Okay? The fourth verse was talking about death and dealing with loss, because we derive a lot of meaning in our life when we can see that our life doesn't last forever. Yeah, and the fact that it doesn't last forever makes us question, well, what is important in my life? What is meaningful? What kind of human being do I want to be, so that when I die I can look back on my life and say, oh, this was well lived. Okay, so in Buddhism we're quite upfront and talk about things like death and suffering. They're not things that are hidden away and that we pretend don't exist, because they do exist. The fifth chapter was about bad friends and about why we don't need them. In other words, people here, bad friends are people who take us away from being true to our heart, who take us away from living a meaningful life, who get us involved in all sorts of other stuff that, even though it might be pleasant, doesn't really satisfy us or make our life very meaningful in the long term. Like your drinking and drugging buddies. They're friends, you're nice to be with them, you spend a lot of time with them, and what do you have to show for it at the end of the evening? A lot of empty bottles, Yeah, and in the long term, what do you have to show for it? Cirrhosis of the liver. Yeah, so these kinds of friends are ones that don't really help us. The sixth verse is relying on a spiritual friend. So, if we want to learn how to purify our mind, how to counteract our ignorance, anger and attachment, how to increase our love, compassion, generosity, wisdom, and so on, then we need a spiritual teacher. Seventh is turning to the Buddhist path for guidance. So, really kind of at some point in our spiritual exploration, we need, we're ready to make a decision about the path we're going to follow. And so, having that very clear in our minds gets us going in a certain direction. If we're always jumping around, I'm going to this path, that path, this teaching, that teaching, it's like going to the 31 flavors and you take a lot of, the little, do they still give the little spoonfuls nowadays? Yeah, you can see how long it's been since I've been there. But, you taste all the little spoonfuls, but you don't have a bowl of anything. Yeah, so similarly, we can taste a lot of things, but at some point we want to just, okay, this is what I'm going to eat, or this is not eat, but this is what I'm going to practice. This is the spiritual tradition I'm going to follow. Okay, then after that, after deciding on our spiritual tradition, verse 8 talks about watch what you're doing, your actions have results. In other words, start having some self-reflection and looking at what am I thinking and feeling, and how is that manifesting in how I'm acting and what I'm saying to other people. And what are my values and principles? And am I living according to my values and principles? Or am I just letting my emotions kind of run wild and, whatever impulse I have, I follow it. And don't worry about the result until the result hits me in the nose. Okay, so that was the 8th chapter. So now we're dealing with the 9th chapter. Okay, so if following up on the 8th chapter, if we're going to really look at our actions, and how am I acting? What kind of person am I in the world? Yeah. Then the next step is to look at how we run around and seek pleasure and do all sorts of actions seeking for pleasure, but, never really get the pleasure we want. And in the process, we may accumulate some good memories, but they're only memories. But then we also accumulate a lot of regrets, and those don't serve us very well in the long run. Okay? So this next verse is leading us to, again, to examine our actions and our motivations, but also to start to look beyond the happiness of this life. And, as Buddhists, we believe in past and future lives, and to think of creating the causes for happiness in future lives too, because, they're going to come, and they may come before old age. Yeah, we make lots of preparation for our old age, and you're not even sure if you're going to get that old, and you're not even sure if what you prepared is going to be there by the time you get that old. Okay? On the other hand, if we really put our energy into doing actions motivated by kindness and generosity and so on, then the imprints of those actions will be with us even as we transit into our next life, and they will influence what we experience then. Okay? So let me read you the verse that we're going to be talking about. It says, like dew on the tip of a blade of grass, pleasures of the three worlds last only a while and then vanish. Aspire to the never-changing supreme state of liberation. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. Okay? So it talks about the pleasures of the three worlds. From a Buddhist view, we have three realms of existence. The desire realm, which is the one we're in, where we are very engaged with objects of the senses and have a lot of attachment to the things that we see and hear and taste and touch and smell, and that's true, isn't it? We're in our lives, we're very outward directed towards the objects of our senses. Yeah, so that's one realm. The second realm is called the form realm, and the beings there have bodies, they have form, but they spend a lot of their time in deep states of tranquil meditation. Yeah, which is very peaceful for them. And then the third realm is a realm of very deep meditative absorption where the beings don't have any kind of gross bodies. Okay, so when it talks about like the dew on the tip of a blade of grass, pleasures of the three realms pleasures of the three worlds last only a while and then vanish. Okay, so that's what they mean by the three realms. Or three worlds, okay? So I like this image of dew on a blade of grass, Especially this season, you see lots of dewdrops on the blade of grass. And, the dew is very pretty in the morning, and yet a couple of hours later it is no more. Yeah, it's totally gone. So in the same way, especially in the desire realm, but in all three realms of cyclic existence, we may have pleasure, but it doesn't last for very long. It changes into something else. It disintegrates. Okay? So it lasts only a while and then vanishes. So, if we think about our lives, yeah, is that true or isn't it true? Yeah, we had breakfast this morning, maybe a good breakfast. It was Sunday morning. Do you do special Sunday morning breakfasts? But where's that breakfast right now? Gone. Okay. Saturday night, we may have had a nice Saturday night. Where's that pleasure? Also no longer existing. Yeah? So if we look back through our lives, we put a lot of energy into looking for pleasure that we may or may not be successful in getting. But even when we are successful, yeah, we enjoy it, but it doesn't last a long time. And at the end of the day, we're left kind of back where we started from. Yeah? So, I'm proposing this. Look at your own life and see if this is true. Now, this is really important, that we look at our own lives. Is this accurately describing my life? So we may have worked very hard to have a certain kind of career or develop a certain talent that we have, to get a certain reputation or prestige in society. We may have worked very hard to have a family life and have a partner. We may have worked very hard to get different possessions, a home or whatever it is, clothes, jewelry, sports equipment, whatever it is you like. Yeah, and we may have been successful in getting some of it, but some of it we may not have been successful in. But either way, we had to put a lot of energy into trying. Okay, and then even when we got things, they were nice. Yeah, they were nice. We enjoyed them. Sometimes we were totally maxed out, blissful. But where is all of that now? Yeah. So it's somehow, I think we're fooled a lot by the external world. Now, everything appears outside so real, and we think, oh, if I only get this, then I'll really be happy. But, nothing we ever get actually makes us feel totally secure, totally satisfied. Anybody here feel totally secure? Yeah? Anybody here feel financially secure? Yeah, you have no worries about finances? Yeah? Anybody feel totally secure in your reputation? Or totally secure, in your family and your friends? That they're providing everything you need and all of that is going to last forever? Yeah? I mean, even our body we don't feel totally secure with, because our body's aging all the time, isn't it? And our mind is doing whatever minds do when they get old. What was I saying? Yeah. And so, all these things just happen, and we may really struggle for pleasure and to try and line everything up in our life, but we can't make everything fixed, because everything by its nature, be it our body, our mind, the external world, or whatever, the people we care about, everything is changing in every split second. Yeah? So this is making us see, okay, I spend a lot of energy struggling for pleasure from things that are impermanent by nature, things that change, have the nature of change. Yeah? And that's the only kind of happiness we know. Until the Buddha tells us, actually, there's another kind of happiness that doesn't depend on external things that are constantly in the state of flux. Yeah, this other kind of happiness, it's called liberation, okay, or nirvana, and it's a permanent and a static state that doesn't change moment to moment. And it's the absence of our ignorance, anger, and attachment. It's in fact, the ultimate nature of a totally purified mind. And if we can realize that nirvana and keep our mind focused on it, then that kind of satisfaction and tranquility never disappears, because nirvana itself is not something that changes. Okay, so that's why the rest of the let me read the verse again. It says, like dew on the tip of a blade of grass, pleasures of the three worlds last only a while and then vanish. That's the present situation. Then, proposing another kind of happiness, aspire to the never-changing supreme state of liberation. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. Okay, so instead of aspiring to become rich and famous and popular and, everything like that, which is not going to last long, let's aspire for this never-changing supreme state of liberation. Okay, so liberation, to attain liberation, there's three particular trainings that we engage in, to create the causes for that state of liberation. So the first is ethical conduct. So to really be mindful and aware of living a good life and learning to restrain ourselves. So when we're we have to first restrain our body and speech, because they're the grossest, ways that we act. And so, learn to, okay, I might not be happy with somebody, but I really don't need to scream and shout at them. I may not be happy at this situation, but I don't need to accuse other people and blame them. Okay? So to learn to step back a little bit and not just, in our life be like a bull in a china shop, acting whatever way we feel like towards others. But this also doesn't mean repressing things and like I can't express myself at all, but rather, being able to learning the antidotes that the Buddha teaches about how to counteract clinging attachment that creates so much dissatisfaction, how to counteract anger and resentment and bitterness so that we don't carry those things with us, how to counteract jealousy, which is such a really painful state of mind, how to counteract conceit and arrogance, which is also quite painful. Okay, so ethical conduct really means, I have a little slogan for ethical conduct, that my definition is stop being a jerk. Yeah? Because when we don't act ethically, we really are being jerks. We're harming ourselves, we're harming other people, we're creating the causes of misery. That's what jerks do, isn't it? Yeah? So I'm a recovering jerk. Maybe we should start Jerks Anonymous. Yeah, and then have, weekly meetings about our ethical conduct. That would be good. Because actually, I think when we really get our ethical conduct together, our relationships with other people are so much better. And then we have much fewer psychological problems. Yeah, because when you think about it, a lot of our psychological unhappiness is due to our relationships with other people. But why don't our relationships go so well? It's often because our ethical conduct is a little bit out of whack. And it's, instead of restraining our negative actions. We're just thinking of how can I get what I want from somebody. And that motivation doesn't really do us any good in the long term. Okay, so ethical conduct is the first step. The second step is developing concentration in our meditation. Yeah, because we have to be able to concentrate so that we can really develop our good qualities. We may have one thought of love or compassion for others, but if we can't let our mind be drenched by that experience of love and compassion, then, that feeling quickly comes and quickly goes. Yeah, so we really work on concentration so that we can really cultivate our inner qualities in quite a beautiful way. And then, in addition to ethical conduct and concentration, we also need wisdom. We need to understand how things function in the world, and we need to understand the ultimate nature of reality. Okay, so these three of ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom, when we practice them together, they will lead us to the how did he say it? The never-changing supreme state of liberation. Okay, and so that state of liberation is called arhatship. An arhat is somebody who is free of ignorance, anger, and attachment, and free of the polluted karma that makes us continue to be reborn. So it's a very blissful, feeling of satisfaction, a state of mind that the mind can rest in for a very, very long time. Yeah. So regardless of whether we're alive or whether we die, the mind is still involved in that state of liberation, still meditating on the ultimate nature of reality. And then in addition, if we really perfect our love and compassion and altruism, we can attain not only that supreme state of liberation, but also full awakening. We ourselves can become fully awakened Buddhas who have all the talents and abilities to be of the best and most efficient benefit to all living beings. So when we think about our lives and the purposes of our lives, if we can aspire for liberation or full awakening, then our life becomes really very meaningful. There's something quite positive that we want to go towards. That we're willing to invest our time and energy in, and that we know when we attain it, it's not going to let us down and it's not going to go away. And especially if we can attain full awakening, then we know that the state we attain will be of the best benefit for all living beings, and then we can really make our lives quite meaningful by being of benefit to others. Okay? So, when we grow up as little kids, now they always say, what do you want to be? And then we think of something as little kids to say, what we're going to be. But everything we're going to be is always temporary, isn't it? And we're never quite sure, what value it is in the long term. Whereas if we really have our deeper aspirations focused on spiritual goals, then, we can really, arrive at a state where we feel quite peaceful and content inside, knowing that we're doing something good. Okay. In the description in this chapter, I was also writing that, as Americans, well, actually in many other countries too, we always aspire for freedom. We cherish our freedom. But what does freedom really mean? Yeah. So freedom in a political way or in a social way, it means, we can say what we want within certain limits, do what we want within certain limits, have what we want within certain limits. We're free to follow any impulse that comes into our mind as long as it doesn't interfere with others too drastically. We're free to buy anything we want, to wear anything we want. Yeah. So we usually think of freedom as states where we really think of freedom as something that involves having everything I want, or having everything be the way I want to be. I'm free to do this. I can do this. Yeah. But, we may be free externally. We can get in our car and drive, and we can, vote for people if you happen to be lucky and can get to a place to register. And if you can get your ID and all those things that they're making you do now. But anyway, we have that kind of freedom, but are we free in our own hearts and minds? Are we free of regret? Are we free of grudges? Are we free of hurt? Are we free of a judgmental mind? Are we free of, craving and clinging? So when we look inside, we may have external freedom, but we don't have internal freedom. In fact, our minds are very controlled by our previous conditioning, mixed together or together with all the input we're getting from society. Now, so when we think about the amount of advertisements that we're exposed to each day, or the newspaper articles we read, the news we watch, the movies we watch, all of these things have an effect on our mind. Are we aware of the effect that these things are having on our minds? Are we voluntarily letting ourselves be conditioned by the media and all these other things in society? And if we're letting ourselves be conditioned and we're following along with what the media and advertising tells us, that we need to be, do, and have, if we're going along with all of that, then are we really free? Yeah. When you read women's magazines and you see certain images of what women look like, and men, you read the men's magazines and what men are supposed to look like. And, it's all certain, there's a certain way that you're supposed to look, right? And how many of us look that way? Yeah? Do any of you feel like you look like the models in the magazines? Not me. Yeah. And you know what? Even the models don't look like the models in the magazines. Because all the pictures have been airbrushed and changed. So, but we're constantly getting this image through the media. You know, you look at the Emmys and the Oscar awards and the movies and everything, and we get this message that this is what I'm supposed to be worthwhile. And none of us are like that. So what does that do to our mind? Doesn't that imprison our mind in a lot of self-loathing or a lot of self-insatisfaction or a lot of discouragement or a lot of grasping, you know, oh, if I only get this and that, then I'll really look right. Yeah. Yeah, so our minds aren't really very free. When we're reinforced by society, which is told, you know, tells us not only do we have to look a certain way, but we have to have certain things. You have to drive a certain kind of car. You have to have a certain kind of partner. Yeah, and of course this differs according to, you know, if you're an artist, your partner's going to look one way. If you're a politician, your partner's going to look another way. You know, but whatever it is you want to be, you have to find a partner that accords with whoever you're trying to be. Okay, so when we get that conditioning and we believe it, then are our minds free? Do we have real freedom? Yeah. When we're very, very attached to somebody and we think, I need this person, I can't live without them, is our mind free? When we've had a bad experience with somebody and we're really hurt and we're angry, are we free? Or are we in the prison of anger? Okay? So if we really take some time, you know, and ask ourselves, what is freedom? Yeah? It's not, freedom isn't being able to go to the shopping center and get anything we want. Freedom, real freedom, is being free from wanting things. Not because you have everything you want, but because all your attachment and greed have been let go of. Yeah, I mean, imagine if you had a mind that just constantly, you know, your slogan is, I'm satisfied, I'm content, what I have is good enough. And imagine going through life, whatever the situation, who I am is good enough. What I have is good enough. Yes, I can improve, and I will improve in the future, but right now I accept myself for who I am. Wouldn't that be radical? Yeah? Instead of going through life feeling I'm not good enough, I don't look good enough, I don't have enough, I don't do enough. Yeah? Not enough people love me, I don't have, you know, I'm not as popular as I want to be, or whatever our thing is. Yeah? But to really have a mind in which our clinging attachment has been eradicated. And then wherever we are, it's fine. I'm happy. Whoever I'm with then, I like that person. Yeah, when our minds are glued just to particular people, then when we're not with those people, we're quite unhappy. Yeah, when we have a mind that is more equanimous and open and caring to everybody, then even we're not with the people we have a particular connection with, we're still happy. Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice that whenever somebody blamed you for something, whether it's a fair accusation or an unfair accusation, wouldn't it be nice to not get all bummed out by it? Wouldn't that be nice? Wow. Yeah. So this is a different kind of freedom, that we're talking about in Buddhism. It's an internal freedom, a freedom of the heart. Yeah? So that's what liberation, the state of liberation, is about. So in each chapter in the book, I included some stories that people wrote, real life stories from real life people. So let's see what's in this chapter. Okay, so here's a story by somebody who was living in China as an expat. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever lived in another country as an expat, especially in a country that is not as not as wealthy as our country. The expat community really has it good, and you can usually join up with, because it's usually business people and diplomats and wealthy people, so you can have a very good life in an expat community. So here was somebody, sorry, she says, this verse describes my experience of living, excuse me, this verse describes my experience of living in China as an expat. We had a nice mini society with so many ways to relax, enjoy, and make ourselves comfortable. Almost every day I went out to eat at a restaurant and enjoyed nice clubs, relaxing massages, a magnificent spa, fascinating travel opportunities. After 2 years of living this life, I saw how empty this lifestyle was. Those pleasures that I really enjoyed left me feeling empty. They had no essence and provided nothing more. What is with my throat today? Let's see if I can change pitch. They had no essence and provided nothing more than fleeting pleasure, and sometimes not even that. So I quit my job and sought to do something else, even though at that time I still hadn't encountered the Buddhist teachings. A few years later, I met the Dharma. I knew it was better than all the pleasures of my expat life. Okay. Oh, and then here's another one that somebody told me. In 2001, I worked in New York, about 9 blocks from the World Trade Center. I had just emerged from the subway when the buildings began to burn. My first reaction was not to believe what was happening in front of me. I felt like it was unfolding on a large TV screen, not before my eyes. I worked in real estate, and many of my clients had offices in the World Trade Center. I had an idea about their lifestyle. They worked so hard and made money, which was supposed to bring them happiness and security. Earlier that day, they had gone to work just like every other morning, being part of the powerhouse of New York City, feeling successful and thinking life is wonderful. Later that day, their lives fell apart. Many of them lost everything, including their lives. Some were jumping out of a window 100 floors up. A month before, I had been on the 107th floor of the World Trade Center. It's an observation roof from which you can see New York like a map on your palm. Today it was crumbling, and the people who worked so hard to earn the wealth that the World Trade Center symbolized were losing it all. Witnessing this was a good reminder of how fragile life is. This understanding energizes me to practice the Dharma while I still have time. One day I too will wake up expecting the day to be just like any other, but instead I will die and lose everything I've gathered during my life. Yeah. So somebody may say, oh, that sounds so depressing. I don't think it's depressing. I think it's realistic. Yeah. And I think the more we can be realistic about our lives, then the less depressing our lives are. I think depression comes when we have very unrealistic expectations that then can't be met. And then we feel really let down. Yeah. But when we know that, yes, everything is transient, and it's going to come, and we can enjoy it, and it's going to go, so let's be okay when it goes. And if our mind is prepared like that, then we can go through life without so many ups and downs, without so many bumps. And if we practice those 3 higher trainings of ethical conduct, concentration, and wisdom, then, as we're going through our life, we can create the causes for that never-changing supreme state of liberation. And then when we die, which we all will at some point or another, then we can have a feeling of satisfaction with our lives. We can look back and say, bye everybody, without going, I don't want to leave you. But just say, realizing that we're changing, they're changing, and just say bye, and then go on without any regrets, without any fear. Okay? So we have a few minutes left for questions or comments. This is a good time to ask if you have something on your mind. Don't be worried about thinking it's a stupid question. Because if you're thinking it, chances are somebody else is too. Okay, then let's do a short meditation now to close the session. In this meditation, I'll just bring up some points gradually for you to think about, okay? Based on what we heard. So just for a minute, come back to your breath. And then consider, think about how are you conditioned and affected by society, by the media, by television. What kind of effect has all of that had on you, on how you feel about yourself, on how you live your life? So just do a little bit of introspection and ask yourself, what kind of influence, how has society and the media influenced me? And are you happy with the way society and the media has influenced you? Or how would you like to change that? And if you would like to change it, how can you change your relationship with the media? And also, how can you change the thoughts that you've already imbibed from them and release those thoughts that you don't think are so worthwhile, and instead direct your mind towards thoughts and values that you really consider more worthwhile? How can you go about doing that? Then we're going to dedicate the positive energy that we created as individuals and as a group